Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Arthritis at Home. My name is Cheryl Koehn. I work for Arthritis Consumer Experts, the host of Arthritis at Home. I couldn't be more excited to be in the studio with Deidre Mackechnie of the Australian Patient Advocacy Alliance to talk about a new education campaign in partnership with our organization, Arthritis Consumer Experts in Canada, Crohn's Colitis Foundation of the United States, and of course, your alliance, Deidre. So welcome to Arthritis at Home.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here and very excited to be talking about this initiative.
Yeah, I cannot wait. So we're just going to dive right in, Deidre, because I know you've got a full plate today. You're in Melbourne, I'm in Vancouver. What's tomorrow like? I should ask as a first question because you're a day ahead
I
of
wish I
us.
had I wish I had the lotto numbers or something that I
Oh,
could
yeah,
get
wouldn't
back to
that
you
be
in
great?
time.
Okay, well, next time, would you work on that, please?
Sure.
Okay, great. All right, so for our audience, Deidre, I'm going to just give them a little bit of a hint into your background. Audience, Deidre is the executive director of the Australian Patient Advocacy Alliance. She brings this incredible passion for the importance of the patient voice in federal policy in Australia and really around the world through this initiative, and I'm sure others. Deidre has held several senior management and executive roles within the public health sector, as well as gaining invaluable experience in the not-for-profit space as the former CEO of Multiple Sclerosis Australia. She is now the co-leader for the Alliance and the Patients and Patents campaign, pardon me. And it's just been a delight to work with you, Deidre, to get this campaign off the ground and now just launched in Australia. So if it's okay with you, we're just going to dive right in and ask you a few basic questions to be able to share with our audience here in Canada, but also yours there in Australia. So first of all, as its name suggests, Arthritis Consumer Experts is an arthritis patient organization, but not true for the Australian Patient Advocacy Alliance. It's different in that it's not disease specific. So tell us a bit more about how the APAA works and how the Patients and Patents Initiative will work in Australia now that you've launched.
Yeah. Look, you're absolutely right. We are a collective of patient organisations. So the member organisations of the Australian Patient Advocacy Alliance are disease-specific organisations like your organisation, whereas we then work above the disease. So we
Right.
have more than 60 patient organisations, which are our member organisations, including Arthritis Australia. So it does represent the patient community. What we do is identify the issues with the healthcare system that affect people living with chronic and complex disease. And we work with the federal government to identify the ways in which we can be better, the
Yep.
ways in which our healthcare system can work better for those people living with chronic and complex disease. So it's very much around that collective voice, around the patient voice, bringing that to the fore and making sure that the policy changes that are made are actually going to work for patients.
Yeah, it's such an important perspective that common ground that we all walk on as chronic disease, or as you say, life-threatening or acute illness sort of scenarios. There's so much at the federal level that touch us all, no matter what we live with. So an incredibly important alliance, not dissimilar from the Making Access Happen group that we're a part of. We're looking at other pieces of policy issues for patients like patents, and like our own involvement in the global RA network, where we have all these different groups. They do focus on RA, but we come from all these different walks of life, speaking different languages, facing different challenges. So
Mm.
incredibly important work you're doing there in Australia to represent a very big collective. Tell us, Deidre, why is the Patients and Patents campaign important for patients in Australia?
Patients in Australia, like patients everywhere, they're no different in that they need information. They are an integral part of the healthcare system. I think we've had a very paternalistic view in the past where, the doctors led the healthcare system, where bureaucrats would make decisions. And I think the patient voice wasn't as strong and wasn't as recognised. But at the end of the day, if the healthcare system doesn't work for patients, then it isn't working.
Yeah.
And I think there are really important components like the patent system that patients really don't know a lot about. And that's part of what we want to achieve with the Alliance, is that we are rolling this out through the launch that we did to our member organisations, who will then share it with their patient cohorts. And so it's about getting the message out. The patent system is a fantastic system in that it protects innovation, so that the innovative medicines industry can invest and come up with, the incredible treatments that are available to people. But what we don't want is misuse of that system, so that eventually these incredibly innovative medicines become more accessible through the use of biosimilars, through generics. And so what we're wanting is for patients to be empowered. Knowledge is power, as they always say. And if we give people that knowledge, then they are better able to engage with the system that so profoundly affects their lives.
Yeah, yeah, this process you've talked about very briefly about, what patents do, why they're there. It's part of a cycle
Mm-hmm.
of pharmaceutical life in the healthcare system. And if you disrupt it doesn't work as well for patients. And I think that's probably a very important message. So I'm assuming the reaction was good and hopefully strong. What are the next steps for the campaign in Australia, Deidre?
The next steps are to what we want to do is because we are a member organisation, we have a member portal on our website. So a section of our website that only our member organisations can log into and access information. So the next step is that we will be having information on there around the Patients and Patents campaign, and a link to the website, so that
Fantastic.
people are able to access that information. We'll be promoting it further through our newsletter, so that people that are reminded, because often people come home from from
Yeah,
a conference, and they're all excited and flushed with the enthusiasm, and then they just get back into the daily grind. So what I
right.
want to do is refresh it for them and say, remember we talked about this, because you're absolutely right. The interest and enthusiasm was really great, and I had
Yeah.
lots of people coming up to me afterwards and asking me how they could access the campaign. So I think it's really important now to do that next step, make that information available really easily to our member organisations, to then use with their particular patient cohort.
Right. Yeah. I think one of the great things are the reaction here in Canada has been excellent. And, we launched it as a co-partnership with Crohn's and Colitis Foundation around the world. And already we've had uptake, in countries like Romania and Greece and others. And it's just so exciting to see, you and myself and our co-leader from Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, we all thought this is so important. And the three of
Mm.
us came together as leaders of our organizations and your alliance and said, this is important enough to do something about. It's actually
Yep.
critical. And it's so nice, Deidre, I'm sure you saw this in your own alliance, to see other people go, yeah, you're right. Or yes, this is very, very important. It's super
Mm.
satisfying to know that our gut sort of instinct was correct. It's an
Yeah.
important issue and one that's creating some barriers for people that really can't afford them. When
Mm.
you think about your hopes for the campaign overall, I have my own for here in Canada, but I'm keen to hear yours for Australia.
I think the key thing in Australia is to ensure that the message gets out there, so that patients are much more empowered. The more that we integrate patients into the decision-making process around their own healthcare and around the wider healthcare system, we want to see that is an informed view. And that's what I'm really hopeful of, is that this will provide patients with that information so that they are better able to, yes, advocate for their own healthcare and their own treatment, but also add their voice to the wider healthcare system so that we can ensure that any barriers that are existing start to be torn down. We don't
Right.
want barriers to access, and that's where, importantly, things like the wider, can't speak, sorry, the wider Making Access campaign is really important, because it's not about destroying any one part of the healthcare system. It's making sure that all the components of the healthcare system are working to their very best so that we have an optimal healthcare system. We often talk in Australia, as you do in Canada, about having a world-class healthcare system. Well, that can only be really true if all the components are working really strongly. And
Yeah.
that will only happen if the patients, particularly in Australia, the 14 million Australians living with a chronic disease, add their voice to that to say, we want the whole thing working really well. We want access, and we want access to treatment, and we want affordable access.
Right. And so that's so beautifully said. And I get goosebumps when I hear you speak, Deidre. Is so uplifting. And, I think one of the great things this campaign has the ability to do is give people not just the knowledge, and knowledge, as you've said rightly, is power, but the vocabulary, right? If you don't have the words, you can't stand there in front of someone who holds a decision that will impact your life.
Mm,
They can write a policy or not that directly impacts your life. So while it's not a conversation we normally have in our doctor's office, it's one that happens way up the food chain that's being manipulated and is having an impact in the clinical conversation because we're not literally able to have it. So
yeah.
in my world, I see everybody marching to a voting booth and actually casting a vote for people who are going to be savvy about patent abuse, patent
Mm,
manipulation, and will
mm,
write policy to uphold the law. I mean, that's really all we're asking.
mm.
Um, so I guess now our audience knows why you and I get on, and they're going to have a chance to meet Laura Wingate, who is our colleague and in leadership in this campaign. I cannot thank you enough, Deidre, for taking a few minutes out of your very busy day. I know you're just starting your day, and I'm staring the afternoon in the face here in Vancouver. But very much appreciate your time. Love being your partner in this campaign, and just thank you so much for everything you're doing for patients like me in Australia. I happen to be so fortunate to spend a sabbatical in Australia, and I feel like an honorary Australian. So thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I think this sort of initiative is so important. It has
Yeah.
been an absolute delight working with you and with Laura. And it has been so exciting to be able to work on something that I think will truly benefit patients and will actually really benefit the healthcare system overall.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. Right out of my co-leader's mouth to you. We're very excited about this campaign. We cannot thank you enough for tuning into this episode of Arthritis at Home. At the end of this interview, you're going to see a link to the website. There's a social media kit there. There's a glossary of terminology so you can get smart about patent language. Anything you want to know, the basics about patent law, and what's happening in the patent world will be there for years to read. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you again, Deidre, for taking time out of your day. And we'll see you again next time.